back to the Wits End podcast. Happy to be back in Toledo, Ohio, in the hallowed halls of Hope Baptist Church.
Who
And
says that? Happy to be back in Toledo.
not very many people, I will say that.
It's because of that church, that blessed church.
Yes, the church is a blessing. It is a great blessing, the people of God here. And it's interesting, though. The next series um, made by the producers of The Office. I don't know
Okay.
if you know The Office
I do. I heard so much
TV
about it.
show.
I watched a couple of episodes. I just couldn't hack it.
You can't
Yeah.
you can't really watch it if you're
No.
gonna have any kind of a conscience because it just gets tawdry very quickly.
It was.
Um,
I was told it was a clean show by Christians. So I'm like, oh, well, like, and
it's
like Christians, like they have a walk with the Lord. I'm like, oh, okay. So we put it on, and by like the second episode, I'm like, that,
it's
that's,
not
I can't.
it's not.
The bridge is too
I
far for
can't
me.
in good conscience
Yeah.
watch it. The problem with
Yeah.
it is it's so funny. There's so much quality humor in it, and I think that's the whatever they put in poison to
Yeah. The
attract the
humor.
rats, you know. And
Yeah.
but it is set in a no-name town, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and
Yep.
the next series that the producers of The Office are making is going to be set in Toledo, Ohio.
No kidding.
And
It's funny.
so
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so that another town
No
that
name.
people like to complain about and criticize and cut down.
I
I say
actually have
bring
a
it
good
on.
friend in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I've been there. I've slept there. So yeah.
Really.
When I found out the office was in Scranton, I'm like, hey, I know Scranton. It's not, yeah, cool
There's
place.
an old song by John Denver called Saturday Night in Toledo, Ohio, and it's pretty funny.
Oh
And
yeah.
he said the opening line, Saturday night in Toledo, Ohio is like being nowhere at all. And it's they roll up the sidewalks precisely at 10, and no one who's been there is heard from again or something like that. It's crazy. And he says I spent a week there one night. He says it's really anyhow, people like to just jump on Toledo, but we love it
my,
here. We stay
my
under the
sister,
radar.
yeah, but it's isn't it so much like God, like in Galilee, to bring light out of a dark place? So it's
Hmm.
in keeping with his mo. My sister was a kind of a legal secretary in downtown Montreal, and then she went on vacation. She went down to your church for her vacation. She came back, and like everybody was back from vacation. People were back from, like, I don't know, Bahamas or whatever. And they asked my sister, like, "Where'd you go?" She's like, "Oh, I went to Toledo, Ohio." And there was like a couple seconds of silence, and the boss just like, "Your vacation was to Toledo, Ohio," and everybody just started laughing. She started laughing again.
That is hilarious. Yes,
You
I
know,
mean,
it's
I'm
an
telling you, somebody showed me my one of my kids showed me a reel of all the sitcoms just dumping on Ohio, like on
really,
Toledo. Yeah, it's so funny
huh?
because everybody says it. It's like, yeah, you know what? You're going to be in the branch office in Toledo, Ohio. Oh
You know
well.
what's another sitcom I was told that by Christians, like, again, good people, that it was clean, was The Big Bang Theory. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
same.
oh, so
Yeah.
like, and I love that kind of humor, because it's like that kind of humor is right up my alley. I was a Frasier fan until, like, it went south, and I can't watch Frasier now. So
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, we'll try The Big Bang Theory. I'm like, man, that is, there's so much sexual stuff in there.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't hack it at the end. So
It's amazing how
you know,
much the focus is on sex. It's amazing.
yeah,
It's like the only thing people can talk about.
yeah, and the subject is so rich. You can do a lot with it. I mean, it's funny to play off like the geek, and, like, the social inhibitions, and kind of, they don't
Eccentricities.
right, yeah. So there's a lot. I get it. It can be funny, but you have such a rich, um, kind of, soil there, for comedy, you could, with a little bit of thinking, you could do even better. I couldn't. I just couldn't. So
Yeah. Well, I think that any a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, and I I think that I've been preaching through a series on Christian liberty, and I think you can do whatever you want. Like people say, do I have the liberty to do it? Well, I mean, you're doing it, right? So the question is, can you do it under the law to Christ? It's not whether or not you can do it or watch it or whatever. It's just, I think the danger is when Christians start arguing for something that in their heart they know is not clean, is not good. That's the real danger. And if you're arguing for it, basically you're feeling convicted about it. And in a lot of
yeah.
ways.
Well, I mean, just because you're feeling convicted about it doesn't automatically mean wrong. If we just take it like that, because in Romans 14, you've got people who have a weak conscience and they're convicted about it, but
Yeah.
it says, "I'm persuaded it's clean." So the conviction, we tend to think conviction equals automatically the truth that it's wrong and you're fighting against it. It could just be a weak conscience, um, but 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 it's definitely that all things are lawful doesn't mean that there isn't sin anymore. There's still things that are sinful. Like stay away from filthy communication. That's a commandment. And those they're filthy communications.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's true.
I don't judge because the people I know that listen to there really are like good Christian people that, and I'm talking about like people I look up to who have gone through trials and love the Lord and do everything right, and they're fine with it. So whatever, that's between them and the Lord. But I just personally, especially I find as a preacher, you have to be careful that mentally your thoughts are really clean too. I think there's an extra kind of like carefulness that you have to keep yourself accountable to.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's stuff like, I don't know. I put on the Golden Girls because I remember watching it as I was a kid, and my wife, she laughs at that stuff. But even I'm trying to find the older stuff because the older stuff tended to be a little bit more careful.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of excited about the Daily Wire coming up because they're supposed to be producing more conservative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in Quebec, I don't know if you know, in Quebec we can't access it, not even with a VPN, because you need like an American credit card. They block it in Quebec. So as far as like conservative entertainment, man, I don't know if the Mormons put out something, but I watch Dry Bar Comedy sometimes. I don't know if you're
that's all Mormon zone.
Yeah.
Hey, somebody mentioned online that your volume is pretty low. So
yeah, thank you, Jesse. Let's see, maybe. Okay, let me try to take care of that. Volume output max. It's probably because
where is your microphone?
Well, I pushed it out. Some people, one person, not some people. One person complained that it was in the forefront of the field of vision. Although some people do it, so I kind of pushed it out.
Well,
I had problems on the lives. Maybe it's different. Maybe at Riverside needs it closer.
It could be. It could be.
Yeah,
I would just bring it in
now. So if it's better now, let me know.
Okay. Yes. Let me try something here. Would you say that this is the first time someone has said that you were too quiet? Normally people are saying you're too loud. Just generally speaking in your life.
Yeah, no. It depends who you ask at what phase of life.
That's true. That's true. Oh my. Okay, well we gotta jump in here to our dear subject, the book of Genesis. And we finished up chapter 8, and we're going to jump back into chapter 9. Amen.
Chapter 9, here we go. Let's open this up. Oh, my Bible's not even open.
That's all right. You have it memorized.
Yeah, I wish. There you go. God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Forgive me. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air. Apparently, that wasn't the case before. Upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea, into your hand are they delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. And at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. And you, be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. So, in like dispensationalism, this is a classic passage that begins a new dispensation. And the understanding of most, you've got here the dispensation of human government, at least the divine approval on it, backed up by the capital punishment being placed in the hands of men. And then there's all kinds of questions we can ask about what was the relationship between human beings and animals before the flood. So there's those two things here that we can get into.
Hmm. Well, when I look at it, like you said, immediately begin to think about the fear and the dread upon every beast of the earth, every fowl of the air. There's a general fear of man in all of the animals that we see. But that fear was not there beforehand. And you can see that when Eve was not afraid of the serpent, and the serpent approached her, very, very easily. There was a conversation going, and just a small thing that I noticed was at the hand of every beast will I require it. I was wondering about that. Your blood of your lives will I require. In other words, I'm keeping track of who sheds blood.
Yeah.
And then,
I was mentioning that on Sunday morning to the church. If an ox gores a man, you stone the ox. I mean, that's like stoning is reserved for people who break the moral law, free moral agents. It's not just kill it. It's odd, it's not just kill it, it's stone it. Like, why? Why not just kill it? Like, slit its throat or, hit its skull with a hammer. No, kill it. Stone it. Slow, painful death. It's almost like the ox kind of is guilty. I mean, they're not a free moral agent like we are, but it's almost like, I don't know. You ever thought about that?
I haven't, but I think that there's something about cattle that they have a normal prescribed series of actions or a boundary in which they live, and then if they go outside of that boundary, that's where an ox would gore someone, is ostensibly because the ox was upset. There was something that was outside of his normal, because otherwise you're living around oxen, you're using them all the time, and you're working together with them, and then that goring. But there's actually a man in our church whose father was basically put on death's door because of a cow. I think it was a bull. I don't know for sure. That rammed him or shoved him up against a fence, a corral fence, and it did major damage to him internally, and he ended up passing away. It's a terrible way to go, and I think in that sense, the series of justice and possibly an awareness too of if an ox gore a man. Now, I was thinking about that. Is that an ox gore his owner, or just any man in general?
Just any man.
Okay.
Any man. You stone the ox.
And it's mentioned that the community is supposed to stone the ox.
I think it just says it shall be stoned. Exodus 21, I think 22. No, 21. Yeah. So if an ox gore, so this is Exodus 21:28. If an ox gore a man or a woman that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned. Stoned. Man, it's like, I mean, the Lord knows what he's talking about. It's just like,
well, and it
just
takes it
arrests my
even
attention.
it takes it even quicker or even further when it says if they knew, if the ox were wont to push with his horn in time past, and it hath been testified to his owner, and he hath not kept him in, but that he hath killed a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner shall be put to death.
Yeah.
But it
Criminal
sounds to me like
negligence.
it's because it says in verse 28, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. It sounds like it's an ox that kills someone outside of, other than the owner, at least,
Yeah. Right.
and possibly
Yes.
someone outside
Yes.
of the farm.
And it could be to put real fear into the owner that could have been you next time if you're not careful. You know, it could be you. I don't know, because the effect might be to really put fear into the owner. And we know that principle does exist because Paul, when he talks about the commandment and the law, thou shalt not muzzle the ox, his question is, doth God take care for oxen? The implied answer there is no. He's doing that to teach us something. And so it could be just to like, because if you're the owner, it's a lot more, it really hits you if you just take him behind a barn and you just like, I don't know, hit it with a hammer or slit its throat. Like, is regular slaughter was not emotionally impactful on people who grew up in a society that does this every day, butchering animals. But stoning that animal emotionally is much more impactful, I suppose. And it would be like, you'd be really careful, because next time, if you're being warned about a particular ox and if you don't keep him in, then you're the one getting stoned.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the idea of justice and the owner. Oh, and I was thinking of the distinction specifically in Exodus 21, the distinction between manslaughter and murder. Here, it's not exactly, because it's not talking about a human killing a human, but it shows the responsibility you have. I think there is a lack of responsibility in our culture. No one wants to own that. I shouldn't say no one, but it's much more, how can you get around this? And then, that you think about, the Lord said, woe unto you lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge, which it seems to me the key of knowledge has to be the fear of the Lord, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. If you don't have fear, then you are not going to be able to have much of a relationship with God. You have to recognize who he is, who you're dealing with. And the lawyers help you to get around the fear of the Lord by getting around consequences, by being able to navigate very challenging judgments that might come on you, heavy judgments. And in a sense, you could almost see where a lawyer, in a sense, which is nothing more than a quote unquote professional of the law, who comes in and says, well, technically speaking, and helps you navigate that. And before you know it, you've lost the fear of the law. It's gone.
Yes. Yeah, and by the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you see in chapter 9, verse 5 of Genesis, where it says, at the hand of every beast will I require it? I thought that was interesting, because we don't typically use that terminology.
Right.
We would say the hoof or the paw or the claw, but the Lord uses the term hand of every beast.
Right. Which goes to show you just not everything is meant to be strictly and absolutely literal.
I was talking about that reference last night in church, about the joy of the Lord, and how there is some overlap between joy and happiness. There's some overlap between joy and delight, and maybe affection, pleasure, that type of thing. And we have to be careful not to go to one extreme or the other. One is to say there's no distinction between these words, and the other is to say there is no similarity between the words, and there's no overlap, because both of those will paint you into a corner.
Yeah, we do. Agreed. We do tend to paint ourselves into a corner. I think the Bible's got a lot more elasticity. The danger, of course, is that some people will take that and run with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the hand of every beast. Yeah.
Did you see verse 3 where it says, "Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green, as you say, herb."
Right.
And for whatever reason, we say herb. I don't know why. It could be because we're just more humble here in the States.
I don't know what about that. I don't know what happened. Like Abel sacrifices, he's sacrificing to God. So he's shedding blood and sacrificing. Didn't he eat the meat? Was it a whole burnt offering of whose meat he did not partake? And then if mankind is not partaking of the meat, why is God at least symbolically partaking of it? I've wondered about this. What we say that for the first time since creation, man was now a carnivore, but I'm not sure about that because Abel is offering flesh on the altar of sacrifice. Any thoughts on that? Or maybe somebody listening online can help us too.
Interesting. Yeah. Give us some feedback. I really don't. I don't have any idea, other than it's a sacrifice with no benefit connected with it. It's just a straight up sacrifice.
Yeah, I don't know. Especially since there's the concomitant commandment not to eat blood that you don't read about before. Now, maybe it was there before because God talks about clean and unclean animals. Talks about Noah choosing clean and unclean animals. And there's nothing that we know of that differentiates between them before the law of Moses. But obviously, God must have communicated to mankind that there is a difference before. But when you see this, that I've given you you can basically eat every moving thing that liveth, and don't eat the blood. Those two things signal that's like they seem to imply that you weren't able to do that before. Now you can, and oh, by the way, when you do it, just be mindful not to consume blood. That's on the side of suggesting that they were not carnivores before the flood. But then again, why are there clean animals in Noah's day, and why is Abel sacrificing?
Well, I think in my mind, it's obviously looking at it through the law back to that situation. It could just be that the Lord wanted to let them know that, number one, there's sin requires a blood sacrifice, so it requires a covering. He made them coats of skins to cover them, and that was the given reason for the sacrifice. Even though it's hidden, all we know is the Lord God made coats of skins. So that was the number one reason for a sacrifice, was to cover sin. And then in bringing the clean and unclean animals on the ark, it was, I'm not going to just take any offering. I'm going to take this offering, right? So, yeah, by the way, let me just throw this in here. Monique said if they listen back to the last video and this one, they might be able to tell what's going on with the volume. No offense, but I really enjoy your podcast, but miss some of it. Well, we are offended, Monique, that you would say that. Deeply. No, but that's great information. And I'm saying, who is it that doesn't want the microphone in the way? Because if it's your wife, that's one thing. Otherwise, we got to hear you. We got to hear you.
So is it? So I suppose it's still low. The volume's still low. That's the first time we have that particular issue. That gets recorded. I've got it on max volume.
If you just send me their email, I'll explain everything to them.
I'm surprised that it's still low. I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, I'd noticed that there's a lot more ambient noise than there used to be, because the microphone has to be close to your mouth. Otherwise, it's not going to work properly. Unless I thought, oh, he must have a new microphone. No, he must have some.
Same one. Yeah. If you can let us know in the comments if if the volume is still low or if you can hear me well.
Yeah, it's never going to work properly until it's closer to your mouth. That's just the way mics are designed.
Okay.
So, but I was thinking about the. I think here is a fine, but his is maybe too loud. I don't know.
Who's
Sorry,
too
Monique.
loud? Mine or
I don't know. I can't understand. There was some improvement, Jesse said, and that's big for Jesse to say that there was improvement. I mean, Guthrie says the mic isn't close enough.
By the way, Guthrie, I reached out to Donnie Budinsky about debating Steve Gregg, but Steve Gregg is not doing any more debates till like 2026. He's kind of out of the scene for now. So, but thank you for the suggestion. I did follow up on it, but there's no avenue to Steve Gregg right now.
Interesting.
So Stephen is saying something similar along the line I was saying. Maybe the offerings were like whole burnt offerings. So you offer and so you're saying so they come together. The sacrifice is to teach them that you need blood to cover sin, but Abel is not partaking of his sacrifice. Like it would have been strictly whole burnt offerings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's okay now. Okay, good. So that could be one
good.
Solution.
That to me that would synchronize those passages completely.
Yeah. Agreed.
And that the clean and the unclean animals have to do more with what type of sacrifice the Lord would accept, rather than eating them.
Consumption.
Clean in the sense of in the sight of God. Yeah. But setting it up perhaps, for the future. But that's an interesting thing, and thank you for bringing up something that now will trouble me.
That's what the podcast is for. Just annoying.
That's what it is. It's destroying all of your preconceived ideas. Look at verse 3. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Now that's interesting. Every living thing that moveth. What happens?
That's true.
As opposed to the clean animal, so to speak.
Man, that's true.
So they would have to be, the clean and unclean has to be connected with the sacrifice itself, not with eating it. And then he further dials it in, focuses it under the Levitical law for eating purposes. But I will say that the one thing that sticks out to me, it's just because growing up, you see things a certain way, and people talk about that there's going to be false, the doctrines of devils in the New Testament in the last days. They're going to forbidding to marry, commanding to abstain from meats which God hath before ordained. What does it say? Which God hath commanded.
The thanksgiving of them which believe in know the truth.
But meat is a word. It's a catch-all word for food.
Yes.
It refers to food in distinction, and then flesh is what we would call meat today.
Right.
So flesh with the life thereof, and that's the first mention of the life of the flesh is in the blood. And I did some research on that earlier this year. I was talking about how the two things that God created man to have was oxygen and blood, and how blood actually carries oxygen throughout the body. So God breathed into man's nostrils the breath of life. Man became a living soul. And so some have postulated that so a person doesn't really have a soul until they breathe oxygen. But a human being is...
We know who you mean when you say some.
Yes. But the flesh, the life of the flesh is in the blood. So what's interesting is that we get this oxygen comes through the mother's nostrils, through her nasal cavity, and it works its way down into the lungs, where it's assimilated by means of certain what's the word I'm looking for? Like capillaries, I can't remember. And so what's interesting there is that it's oxygen And the blood is carrying oxygen, the breath of life, through our bodies. That's the reason why we need blood, is because we need that oxygen. And it provides that to all of our extremities. And so it is literally the breath of life is in the blood.
Yeah. Yeah, but
I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board. I was hoping to really knock your socks off, George. What do you think?
well, that makes sense to me what you're saying.
Okay.
So I got no issues with that at all.
But I want you to be amazed at what I found.
Well, I take notes all the time.
It's like I have
the
two
craziness.
I have two daughters.
Heresy.
They have my daughters. They'll say something to me, and then they will tell me whether or not they like my response, how I responded to it. And they'll say, "Dad, look at this. Oh, that's cool. Oh, you don't like it." And I'm like, "Oh, for crying out loud! You want to control everything, both the presentation and the response. You want
the
it all. Everything has to be controlled." Oh, my soul. So I think they're rubbing off on me. Cue the amazement. I love it.
Yeah. So this is now I've heard people say it. So we will look at this as the beginning of a capital punishment, right? And which is basically human government, because capital punishment definitely is the kind of framework, the base ground of a human government. Even atheists understand this, or secularists. I've heard the argument made. I think Ben Shapiro makes the argument. He's not the first, definitely, but basically that all governments, ultimately, including Western liberal governments, are upheld by the threat of violence. Right? Ultimately, there's a gun behind it. So it stands to reason that capital punishment is the basis of human government. Now the question would be, wasn't there a human government before? I don't know. There definitely would have been some kind of governance, that's for sure. But this is at least the first time that the Holy Spirit deems it important to communicate to us that this is now the framework under which you ought to operate. So even if there was some kind of organization, capital punishment, before the flood, that doesn't change the fact that here it is codified and formalized. And so there's like an emphasis now on it as a framework for human government. And the Lord essentially is what he's saying is, I'm delegating authority. You can tell the difference from, because like Tommy McCurtry say, well, Abel was afraid of being killed, and that's because there was capital punishment. Well, no, not necessarily. He could have been just being afraid of being killed by vigilantes, not necessarily by a civil government structure. This is the first time that we read of that God delegates authority, meaning I'm not the one who's going to kill people and avenge them, as he had just done via the flood in mass. So now he's saying there's a connection there between, I'm not going to kill everybody again, now you do it. Those two things are connected. And so the implication is, I was in charge of killing murderers, but now I'm devolving that authority down to you. Which I kind of wonder at this, because mankind has failed a test, and the Lord increases the level of responsibility that mankind has rather than diminishes it. I always kind of like found that kind of odd. Like, mankind has completely failed. You had to reset, really. And now you delegate even more authority to mankind. It seems to me, unless I'm missing something.
Well, this is a reset, for one thing. We know it's a reset. And basically the world had run its course from the Garden of Eden all the way to the flood. And of course, at this time, the world was still all of one language and one speech. And every man is just doing what he wants to do. And I think it's basically like, it's almost like, in some ways, it's like Venezuela, where they decided to build these maximum, or is it, no, El Salvador, where they decided to build these maximum security prisons. And, we're going to start over, and the whole earth is full, the whole country's full of violence. and we're going to start putting people in these maximum security prisons. And it's like, what was the problem? The imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually, and it was the violence filled the earth in the pre-flood world. And so, because that's the direction everybody goes. If pleasure, if good equals pleasure and evil equals pain, then anything that brings pleasure to me is good, right? And anything that causes me pain is bad. And so if a law or if a guideline or if someone's boundary causes me pain, that it's bad. And therefore I can do whatever I want. And that's the way that evil multiplies in a culture, a disregard for people's personal boundaries. And so what happens is it continues to spread and spread and spread. So what's the alternative? The alternative is just to start over and say, we're going to do the Garden of Eden all over again. But how could you? Because of the sin nature that had multiplied in the earth. I don't know. I think what would be the alternative? It would basically be, I mean, he couldn't do the same thing. Like, we're not going to do the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil anymore. That's not going to be the boundary because you ruined that. And now the boundary is going to be, you guys are going to be policing yourselves. And in a sense, you're going to be dealing with the consequences of how you treat one another.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So God is basically, it's not a promotion. It's you deal with it now.
Yeah. 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 I mean, because you think about it with parents, it's like, oh, now we're parents. We have kids. We can do whatever we want. No, now you're going to deal with the consequences of sin. And you're going to realize even more, okay, yeah, I get it. I was this way when I was a kid. That I can see my sin nature in my kids. And I can see the bad points as much as I love them. And I do think that is maturity, is people personally dealing with the consequences of their own sin. I think the longer that a person is protected from consequences, the longer they can stay immature.
So I like that idea. So basically, you deal with it now, and you're going to learn. You're going to learn from it, because you look at God and you say, "Well, how could God have done this? You know, this is cruel. This is beyond genocide. It's really genome. It's genus on the sense of the human mankind. He's just killed everybody except 8 people." And it could be the Lord says, "All right, let's reset, and now you're in charge of stopping killing and violence." And then mankind goes, "Well, we're not going to do it because we're more merciful than God. So we're going to abolish capital punishment." And you've got a principle that says that because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the hearts of the children of men are fully set in them to do evil. And so you get a society that's increasingly wicked because there's no punishment of murder. And then mankind gets to the point where, like, whoa, we're completely overrun. And mankind defaults back to, oh, we got to go back to putting murderers to death and rapists to death. And the Lord says, see, that's the situation I was facing. So like he's setting them up so they can experience experientially the fact that you need to draw a red line and put to death a certain people. That it's not out of cruelty, it's out of necessity to save civilization, to save society.
Yeah, and I think of it as mom and dad going away from their kids, and let's say the kids are teenagers, and they go away, out of town or something, and they say, "Hey, listen, you guys just be nice and be kind and do what's right." And they have a bunch of friends over, and it just ends up in complete chaos, and all kinds of junk happens. So when they come back, they say, "All right, listen, Timmy's in charge, and whatever Timmy tells me, I'm going to take action on when I come back."
Right.
And I think because then what happens is everyone realizes there's going to be a punishment, and the Lord's saying, "Your blood will I require at your hand." Like, I am coming back. So yeah, people are in charge. What does he say? "Your blood of your lives will I require." And at the hand of every beast will I require it. At the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Like
Hmm.
I am coming back to I'm going to account for everything that happens. Where,
See, Mark, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, how did you treat one another? So somebody's in charge, whoever that is, but I'm in charge of that person. I'm going to require it. I want an explanation.
See that, yeah, that it all figures. Mark Twain, who was not a believer, wrote that if he had been God, he would have finished the job and wiped out all mankind. So, in a way, what he saw is he saw a post-diluvian world that is not applying death penalty, that is loose on murderers and rapists, like egregious criminals. And he comes to the conclusion, like, this is a mess. Like, outer water wiped out everybody. And now that the Lord has allowed humanity to kind of do it on its own, you've got even somebody who is practically an atheist going, yeah, I would have finished the job. And God goes, see? Like, you're even more extreme than I am. At least I saved humankind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Cool.
and it's interesting. Mark Twain would never have said, I wish God would, and I wish God would have, if I were God, I would have killed everybody, including myself. He would never say that.
Right.
But that is what God did.
Right. Right.
He didn't kill everybody and destroy everybody, but he did kill himself. He allowed himself to be killed in that sense. And that was an act of his own volition. But one thing I did see here too, did you see, we talk a lot about the how the image of God, man was made in the image of God, and then Adam had a son in his own image, it says. But the Lord does hearken back to it in verse 6. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God
That's right.
made he man.
Right. Right. We're still in the
So,
image of God.
yeah.
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 Even James says that we're made in the similitude of God. So you can, but I mean, both can be true. You can lose part of that image and still
Mm-hmm.
be said to bear the image.
I always have thought of it like, I don't know if I'd say always, but it seems like you're in scripture as believers and as preachers, we're trying to, there's a danger in pursuing the singularity of a position.
Yeah.
Always trying to be the ultimate, and then everything else is wrong. So one would say, man is made in the image of God, and someone said, no, man was made in Adam's image. Well, where did Adam get his image, right? So we are in a broken image of God, maybe.
Correct. That's it.
It's like a mirror. All the pieces are there, but the mirror is shattered.
That's exactly
it's still in the same shape.
That's actually kind of early Christian theology. Early church writers would write about we're like a broken icon in the sense of image of God, broken image bearers. So
is that why? I wonder if that's why mosaics were made. Probably not.
You know what? That's a great thought. And I don't know if that's the case, but what I do know is that's a great illustration. That's a great illustration. We're basically a mosaic. We're like broken pieces, but you still have an overall sense of the image of God, right? But it's broken. I really like that. I really like that.
I've heard of churches like naming themselves Mosaic Church, things like that.
Probably in reference to the multiculturalism, no?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. I don't really know. Probably, yeah. But
that's cool. After the fall, I'm writing that down. Thank you. Writing down a lot today. All right.
That's the difference between you and I. You take good notes, and I just forget everything.
Yeah, I'm kind of obsessive about taking notes. Just the older we get, the more you forget. So, a while ago we were invited. Our church got invited. Long story short, by the leader of the Conservative Party of Quebec to attend their leadership conference, and we got to get our own stand. In fact, There were other organizations that were going to have a stand. They canceled, so we ended up being the only ones having a stand. So I put 2 tables together, passed out gospel tracts and Bibles at the conference, which everyone gladly took. Quebec is very secular. This is not like the Republican Party, and we had a printout. We printed out a large poster of the responsibilities of human government according to the Bible, and the ones I could gather from Scripture is our external security by means of armed warfare. Because you see the Lord ordaining and commanding and ordaining and allowing and approving standing armies, internal security by means of imprisonment and punishment, capital punishment, ministering civil justice by judges and kings, also by priests, but only under the Mosaic law. One of the responsibilities of human government I see in the Bible is conducting a national census in time of war, like you read in Numbers, collecting taxes at a minimal rate, because there are some taxes even under the law of Moses, not just Joseph's example in time of crisis. Building cities and infrastructure. You can read about Hezekiah, who builds a conduit, brings water into the city. Number 7, maintaining a national communication system, again, because Hezekiah sends out postmen, or Hezekiah. Number 8, indirect control of the economy to benefit the poor once every 7 years and once every 50 years. So all debts are forgiven. The poor can come and they glean after the fields. So you've got the family unit as a safety net, but the government there is a law that provides for possible relief for the poor if they take certain actions. Providing basic necessities in times of crisis, like Joseph does. And then in Israel's case, under the law of Moses, there was an added element of upholding God's moral laws. But those first 9 seem to be cross-dispensational across the board, which is internal and external security, civil justice, conducting everything that's national census, national infrastructure, communication systems, and then indirect control of the economy and providing basic necessities in times of crisis. Those are the ones I could gather from.
Yeah, that's really good.
The scriptures. So we had them printed out in French on display there. That government does have responsibilities, and that's the scope of it, and not more than that.
That's really good. I like that. I've never heard that put together in such a succinct format, because we all have ideas of, well, they should be doing this or should be doing that. Can you imagine what our societies would be like if every 7 years all debts were completely forgiven?
That'd be great.
What that would do for what would that do for the spirit of our society?
Yep.
And I know that people would say, well, it already happens through bankruptcy to a certain degree, but people are severely punished, and there's a little bit of a black mark on people coming through that. I have never done it, so I don't know for sure, but I know people who have. It's something it's a mental load that, I got forgiven of this, but it was kind of around
and you're penalized thereafter for it. And keep in mind, the United States economic system stands out not only for its freedom, but for how easy it is to declare bankruptcy. You can't do what you do in Europe, what you guys do. Like, it's so easy in the States. Canada also a little bit, because it's similar to the American system. This notion of like going and filing for bankruptcy and getting bad credit and getting to start again, that is almost exclusive to the United States and somewhat Canada. It is a lot harder to do in Europe and the rest of the world. So even there, it's more like of the Christian influence that you can kind of like, debts are forgiven, you can restart. But definitely, it would curb covetousness. No bubbles. You don't get economic bubbles anymore. Like the mortgage bubble that busted in 2008, where like you're loaning for 35 years and like subpar loans. None of that happens.
Well, that's crazy. That's crazy. So I hadn't even thought about that. So you're not. It's irrespective of the number, of the amount. The debt is forgiven irrespective of the number. Right. So if you
you're going to lend a lot less too. You're going to be careful about crazy.
Yes, and you're going to probably charge a lot more, knowing how close the year of Jubilee is, or what's it called, the 7th year?
Yeah, well, the 7th year is Jubilees is 50 every 50. So there's a reset every 7, and then also every 50.
Mm-hmm. So you would charge a lot more interest probably.
Well, so between them, they couldn't charge on interest between the Jews,
Yeah.
unless there was an exception, unless there's no more poor among you. If everybody was prosperous, then Jews could charge each other interest. But you definitely you know what you're doing. You're like, okay, I'm lending with a view of a 7-year loan, so at least the sums are a lot smaller, and you know that you're not going to be you're going to be more careful about who you lend. Well, yeah, you're going to be more careful about who you lend to, because you know the guy after 7 years just can go, hey, I'm free.
Yeah, and the Lord talks about that, doesn't he? He says, beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release, is at hand, and thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him not. That's crazy. That you're like, well, I'm not gonna give this to him because, and I guess it's not even giving, right? It would be a lending.
It's you have
lend
to pay
him
back
sufficient
without interest. Yeah.
Yes, lend him. So this guy really needs $10,000. I'll lend him the $10,000, which is a debt that he owes me. But next year is the 7th year. I'm not giving it to him.
Right. But so the Lord considers it a lesser evil that some people might be tempted to think that way than lending out large amounts, which people could not pay back, and they'd be on the hook for the rest of their life, and it would break them. Between those two evils, the Lord seems to choose the one that seems to disincentivizes people from loaning. That's how dangerous large loans are. I mean, that's what happened. Your marketing bubble, well, it had ripple effects throughout the world, but basically it was giving out subprime loans to people who could not afford those homes. They were repackaged. Those loans were like repackaged via various financial tools, and then sold to people who could never pay back those loans. And they seemed to be guarantees. And so everybody started defaulting because they just couldn't pay the loans. So everybody starts defaulting, and then you have the market crash, the housing bubble that happened in 2008. That would never have happened under the Israelite system, because every 7 years the thing, it's out, and every 50th year it's out. So you have a lot smaller loans, rather than like, yeah, we're loaning you for $100,000 so you can buy a house and you're on the hook for the next 35 years. In Italy, mortgage debts are generational. So if you die, that debt goes on to your kid. They got to pay your debt for your house and theirs.
Wow.
Last I heard. I don't know if the law has changed. The Lord says basically all those marketing schemes that kind of suck people dry over the long term, the banks are going to be a lot more careful. What happened after the marketing bubble? The banks were all suddenly much more careful about lending, right? And that's kind of Lord what he wants.
It's such an interesting topic to get into, because we just accept things. It used to be in our country that you didn't hear a lot about divorce. And now divorce is just like, well, it happens. And the likelihood is it's going to happen to you. It's that type of thing. Well, the same is true with mortgages. It used to not be such a common thing. Because you would hear, you read literature, even novels, and in the early 20th century, and you would hear things like, we're going to have to mortgage the farm. We're going to have to mortgage our house. Like, I can't believe we're going to do this. And it literally, in some ways, of course, we know it's connected with death, the word itself. It's a death of your financial independence. In some ways, it's a death of your strength and ability, your autonomy. And so, thinking of it in this standpoint, because now mortgage is like, everybody got to have a mortgage. You got to have a mortgage, and people will say things like, renting is just pouring money down a rat hole. And I understand why they say that, but I think we've gotten so used to debt in our country. And why? Well, it's got to be covetousness. We have to have this. And in some cases, there's a need there. I understand. I just think that have we ever looked at it as critically from the other side? right? That we have to
Yeah,
have to
it's
have to have to have that.
being more careful. I mean, historically, this this idea of everybody has to own a house is basically British, and it injects a lot more money into the economy. Um, and it is a blessing to own a house. It definitely is, but now you're born into that system.
Hmm.
So, like I know Dave Ramsey, even Dave Ramsey tells you get a 15-year mortgage. So he kind of,
Yeah,
even the super conservative guys saying, well, you kind of have to get it. I
yeah.
got one. Um, you just have to be careful to do it within your means. In Romans 13, when Paul says, "Oh no man anything," the context there, of course, is respecting authorities. So if you owe respect to someone, show respect. If you
Hmm.
owe deference to someone, show them deference. Uh,
Well, the
and
borrower
loaning,
is servant to the lender. We know that.
so that's what
Um,
it is. You have to keep exactly. You have to keep those principles in mind and be careful. Because like
mhm.
Elisha, the sons of Elisha, the sons of the prophets tell Elisha, the place is too narrow for us, let us build. He says, okay. They say, come with us. He says, okay. The guy loses an axe head into the water, and he says, oh man of God, it was borrowed. And then
Mhm.
Elisha does a miracle and brings it back. So what you've got there is prophets borrowing for a building project. So there is that.
That's
But
interesting. I never tracked that down. Look at you, man. You found
yeah,
it. You're
yeah.
not by any chance looking to build
So, well, yeah. So no, but in the
someday.
first years of the church, we still rent, but in the first years of the church, we're dollar cinema. When I came across that passage, I'm like, oh, look at that. That's interesting.
That is
And
great, man.
yeah, so it's okay. Just be careful not to basically borrow above your means. That I think it becomes covetousness when you borrow above your means.
Yes, Pastor Carter. When I worked for him, I was talking to him about debt, and for whatever reason, in my mind, I was frozen, and I was like, "You can't do this. You can't have debt." And he said, "If you have an agreement with a lender, then that says you owe me this every month, then once you've paid that, you no longer owe him anything until the next month. So, in the sense of you shouldn't
Mm,
ever have any credit whatsoever. He said, if you have an agreement with your lender, pay me this, and you pay that, then your debt is paid. Now, the problem is it's a long term thing,
right, right,
but the owner or the lender is not expecting it all this month. And
right,
so you're not truly in the red, you're in the
right,
black as
right.
long as you continue to pay it. You are his
Yeah,
servant and you agree that. But it's interesting that that is also one of the things that the year of release can come, the seventh year, and a servant can say, I'm going to stay with my master because I love my master. I'm going to intentionally choose to be a servant,
yes,
a bondservant, right? To
yes,
be in debt. I'm going to stay here. And it says he's going to bore the ear through with an awl and he'll be a servant forever. I don't know what the ear thing means, other than captivity, slaves, I guess.
right.
Um, but yeah, I just think that service you can choose to be, and why it's because in some ways because he said thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt. You were there for 400 years. You were a servant. That's part of your history, and just keep that in mind.
Well, the sheer fact that the Lord says, "It shall not seem evil unto thee to lend, but thou shalt surely
Hmm.
open your hand." So obviously, God isn't. He's accepting of people being in debt because they have to pay back that loan. He said, "The
You know,
wicked borroweth and payeth not again." Actually, that was our preaching on Wednesday night. Not the wicked borroweth. The wicked borroweth and payeth not again. That's when it
yes,
becomes sinful. And when you put yourself, when you're coveting and you pierce yourself through with many sorrows, when you clearly can't afford it, and you're taking the risk of going under. Um,
right, and really comes down to how much freedom and liberty do you want to have? If if you want to have more freedom as far as in your schedule, then you're not going to um, you're not going to be able to have as many things because you won't have the money.
mm,
If right, so if you go to work for somebody, you'll have less freedom in your schedule, but you'll have money, and so it's kind of like how much do we want to live? And I think you're right. I think it's best for everybody, every believer, every family to look at their life and say, "This is how much I value my time." You know, because we've got folks here that like we're just going to cut back and we're going to live in a house that's not the nicest on the block, not going to buy the nicest of stuff, but we value this more.
Yeah.
And I think that's legitimate.
It'd be cool someday. You've got guys in your church that are pretty well versed on finance. It'd be cool someday if you can bring someone. I've been looking for someone to come to our church and do this, and I have not been able to find somebody to come and kind of give a Christian perspective on budgeting and help people navigate that. So I did something out of the Bible, but I think that's a very helpful thing to do in churches.
Oh, I agree completely. I think it's something that we don't do enough. And I know for myself, I typically don't talk enough about finances. And partly is because I think there is an unstated belief that money is evil, that money is dirty. And because of that, we kind of like, well, let's just not talk about what we make and let's not talk about investment. And, those things are all basically based on greed and covetousness. But a deep dive from a biblical perspective would be very helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Because we spend so much time making money.
The Lord rebukes the slothful servant. He says, at the very least, you could have given it to the borrower so I can get my own with usury. So
yes.
That's basically,
yes.
You got to be careful with investing in the market. It's not for everybody. But it's something very safe, what the Lord is describing. He says, like, you could have tried
Well,
something.
and that's why people will say, okay, well, it's nothing more than legalized gambling, which of course gambling is legalized anyhow nowadays. The idea of playing the market, so to speak. But the Lord came back and wanted to know what every man had gained by trading.
That's right.
And what is that? That's trading. It's investment. That's taking risks.
Sure.
And he said,
How
I expect a return.
Risk?
Yeah. You're giving what you have for something that you do not have.
For sure. I think that's the reason why the Lord, I think one of the most beautiful things God has done in separating the bounds of the nations is he's given different natural resources to different nations. Arabs get the oil and the incense, right? Some parts of Africa have the gold and the diamonds. Others have the horses. Others have the trees. Others have the cocoa. Others have the water. Others have the wheat. They don't all have it all. And that forces the nations to trade, and it's supposed to build ties and can be conducive to peace, because you can't trade in times of war. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Wow. That's a blessing. It really kind of it makes me very intrigued. I want to learn more about that. That's really helpful. Yeah, man. Yeah. Okay, well, here we are. It's already
government.
That's it. Okay, we're at an hour, so we're gonna cut it off. This has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I've learned something, and I will be thinking about that more. So, guys, if you want to contact us, we're at witsendguys@gmail.com, and you can catch up, ask a question, whatever you want to do. Let us know you're listening. Thanks for the feedback, guys. We had a good time. And anything else you want to say?
Just to hit the comments, a couple of them, Guthrie. I like Steve Gregg idea on conditional eternal security. The idea that only believers have eternal security. That there's some good points to it. So that's basically classical Arminian position, not Wesleyan. That the only way in is through faith, and the only way out is through faith. It's definitely a stronger position than Wesleyan Arminianism. My only issue with that is 2 Timothy 2. If we believe not, yet he by faithfully cannot deny himself. And also, there's an ontological aspect to our salvation, whereby you're bone of Christ and sealed with the Holy Spirit of God. So I don't see how classical Arminianism would reconcile those tension points. And then for Sister Monique, she talks about she used a hyperbaric treatment, so the oxygen would heal the blood. You were talking about the blood flow there. She said that she has subjected herself to hyperbaric treatment, so the oxygen will heal the blood flow that isn't working.
Yeah, and it's 10 times the oxygen, something like that, hyperbaric.
Under pressure, it's that much. Wow. Yeah.
I don't know how much it is, but it's a lot more than normal.
Oxygen heals. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us. And Lord willing, we'll be back at it next time around with George's mic firmly in front of him where he can be heard.
I'll be like this.
There you go. Make that a matter of daily prayer, if you will.
That's it.
My soul. Well, no, we love you guys, and it's good talking with you. We'll catch you next time around.
God bless you guys.
I do.